I'm gonna be honest, the remaster of Star Fox 64 along with Ocarina of Time were the primary reasons I wanted a 3DS back during its initial release. Now, I'm typically the kind that dislikes owning more than one version of the same game, even if the other version is a remaster or a remake. It's just hard for me to get around the idea of buying the same game again if I already own it in some form. However, Ocarina of Time and Star Fox 64 3D were those very few exceptions to where I set aside that rule of mine. And it has to do with my expectations for these games when I was younger, hear about them in Super Smash Bros. Melee, and it's a bit weird to get into right now. Anyways, my first experience with Star Fox 64 was on the Wii Virtual Console, and despite having played Assault prior, this is for sure my favorite Star Fox, as predictable as that may seem. I mean, 64 just greatly excelled in one major area, and that to me was the gameplay. Definitely not to say that Assault didn't have great gameplay, at least in my opinion, but 64 just absolutely nailed it. But I'm not here to talk about how great Star Fox 64 is, you can already figure that. I'm here to look at how the 3DS version compares to the N64 original. Now, right off the bat, you can see that the game looks stunning on the 3DS. It really got a nice graphical overhaul from the 64 version while being ported to 3DS. Some areas that really stand out to me from a visual sense are Titania and Ficina. Oh yeah, and they fixed the naming of Ficina to its actual name. While there are a couple of levels where I think that the 64 version has more of an upper hand over this one, mainly when it comes to the lighting, overall I felt that from a visual sense, the 3DS was a nice improvement. There's some other new useful features here too. For the single player campaign, you've been given the ability to save your progress so you won't have to try to beat it all in one go like in the original. Even though a single run through would only take like less than 2 hours to beat, being able to save at any point is still greatly appreciated. Score attack is a big one for me because now you're able to go to any planet right at the start, instead of always having to play through the game just because you want to play a specific level. Now you can just pick that level right from the get-go. They also revamped the multiplayer mode, and now you can actually play on your own with CPUs. But unfortunately, because Nintendo can't take a damn hint, no online mode. But that's really a subject on its own. Also sound test. But how does the gameplay itself fare? Well, lucky for us, it plays just as well as it did on the N64. However, I will say movement doesn't feel as tight as it did on the original version, but that mostly has to do with the system it's on. The 3DS Circle Pad just doesn't really hold up as well as its standard control stick. Though despite that, I personally didn't see it being too much of an issue, and everything else that was great about 64's gameplay is still retained in the 3DS version. Now, in the midst of all the positives about this version, there is one major difference that just may turn certain people away from this game, and that's the sound, namely the soundtrack and voiceovers. Okay, I'll just say this, the music is not as good as it was on the N64. I mean, what they have here works well enough, but coming off Star Fox 64 soundtrack, the remixes in this version just simply don't compare. At best, they have their own unique flavor to them, like in the case of Aqua's. At worst, it's just a far cry from the original. Here's just a quick example of what I mean. This easily could have been fixed if they just had an option to retain the original soundtrack. Heck, they even still can do it with an update, but I guess we'll just have to accept this loss. But I think what's probably going to get more into people's nerves are the redundant voices. Okay, so out of all the characters in this game, the only ones who I think sound even remotely just as good as they did back then are Pigma, and I guess Fox, though he sounds a little higher pitched in here than he did back then. And Rob, in my opinion, sounds even better than he did in the original, though if only because his voice now aligns more with the GameCube Star Foxes. Everyone else, you're either gonna have to get used to, or they just straight sound bad. Andrew Okini sounds terrible, Leon fucked up horribly on 2 major lines, Falco and Wolf just sound like all shells compared to 64, and Adros here is a complete joke compared to 64 counterpart, especially his laugh. God, I'm never gonna get over how awfully generic his laugh is in this version. Yeah, it's not that great. I understand why they had to re-record, because the audio quality of the originals don't sound too well today or some gay business, but man, it sounds like they just used the first take they got out of everyone without realizing that doing retakes was a thing. I hate to say it, but this is pretty much the biggest drawback to this version that I essentially had to force myself to get used to. Because that aside, this is just, I think, the best way to play Star Fox 64. Now that I think about it, it's kind of like Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes, where aside the poor soundtrack and the hit or miss voice acting, just about everything else I thought was better than the original. But at the end of the day, I do still recommend this version of Star Fox 64, because there's a lot more benefits that this version provides that the original 64 doesn't. Unfortunately, you won't exactly have the easiest time finding this game, because for some reason Nintendo thought it was a good idea to have these fucking things get the $20 discount treatment over Star Fox 64 3D. But again, that's an entirely different subject. Though that only applies to North America and Japan, it actually did in fact get the Nintendo Selects treatment in Europe and Australia. Though hey, the original is still up for grabs for only $10 on the Virtual Console, so if you for some reason haven't played this game, well, you really freaking need to.